La la la. Do you believe? A person's life is doomed from the moment your character is formed. Although there will be many opportunities and choices in life, when you face these opportunities and choices, your character and cognition are already doomed. Choose, as a doomed loser, are you willing to reshape your life from now on? Life Simulator, change the future, change your life, you deserve it. Outside the city of Luoyang, Lu Buletin sat on a red warhorse riding slowly on the spacious official road. The nightmare-like information came again in his mind, and there was the sound of beating lingering in his ears. Not much, but he kept saying that, like mosquitoes and flies in summer, they kept flashing in your ears, and you couldn't kill them, making Lu Buletin annoyed. Feng Xian, why are you so restless these past few days? Ho Chins came to Lu Buletin and looked at him suspiciously. I don't know, there are always some inexplicable words in my ear these few days, which is extremely annoying. Lu Buletin held the reins with one hand, and looked at the surrounding scenery. In the distance, he could vaguely see the village gradually becoming clear in his line of sight. But there are no more people. Last year, when the capital was moved, the people of Heluo were basically driven into Jingzhou. Last year, the ground was in a mess, but this year is no longer visible. The spacious official road is overgrown with weeds, and half of the pedestrians are not seen. As we got closer, many of those villages were in ruins, and even those who occasionally slipped through the net would run away when they saw the army from a distance. The Ziliang army has now become a of plague in Heluo. Heluo used to be prosperous in the past, but now, apart from the army, there are no more figures to be found. Walking on this post road, all you can feel is the desolation, which made Lu Buletin, who was already very irritable because of the magic sound in his mind, a bit more annoying. How prosperous Luoyang used to be, but now it has become like this. Feng Xian, who do you blame for this? Ho Cheng sighed. I shouldn't blame me. Lu Buletin stroked Kitu's mane and didn't answer the question. Who is to blame? It's hard to say, blame Dong Zhou? Or blame the Guandong allied forces? It can be blamed, but it seems that he can't blame him. He is just a soldier. His view of right and wrong is very pure. He was at fault, Luoyang became what he is now, and he looked uncomfortable, but when asked what was wrong with him, he couldn't answer. Ho Chang imitated Lu Buletin to feel the mane of the war horse, but looked enviously at Lu Buletin's Kitu. For a military general, a BMW of Kitu's level is definitely second life, even more important than weapons. Feng Xian, what exactly did the voice that appeared in your ear say? After walking for a while, Ho Chang was a little bored and turned to look at Lu Budeo. Do you believe it? A person's life is doomed from the moment his character is formed, although there will be many opportunities and many choices in life. Lu Buletin felt that it must be his fellow countryman who said this, and he used it from Zhuyuan. It's really strange that the dialect of the old friend is not the soul of an old friend, right? Ho Chang listened with a confused expression, looked at Lu Buletin and said, what kind of life character? That's right, I don't understand either. Lu Buletin shook his head, the ghost knew what the thing was talking about. Perhaps it was a warning from ghosts and gods. Ho Chang suddenly said. Hey! Lu Buletin looked at Ho Chang, a little puzzled. Someone heard that when Chen Sheng rebelled against Qin, there was a fox immortal Yeming saying, De Chuxing, Chen Sheng is king, and then Chen Sheng really became king, and when Jiaozu cut the white snake, it seems that ghosts and gods helped him. Ho Cheng said excitedly, Feng Xian may also be a person with destiny. Then, Lu Buletin heard the voice ringing in his ears again, what's the meaning of these words? Chen Sheng's message is clear, De Chuxing, King Chen Sheng, just those 6 words. I have said a lot of words here, but Lu Buletin has never heard many words. What is this? This. Ho Chang looked at a loss, and then said, this requires you to take a closer look. If you can solve the mystery, you may be able to achieve an unworldly achievement. Hey, it's baseless, how can I go into details? Lu Buletin sighed. He and the group of brothers around him have the highest level of education. If he went back to Luoyang to ask those famous people, he might be dumped again. On his face, although Lu Buletin respects celebrities, he has been slapped a lot, and he is very reluctant to communicate with those people. When he rests today, he must take a good look. Lu Kiju, now that the enemy is in front of you, why are you so rambunctious? A man with a beard all over his face came to Lu Buletin's side, and he couldn't help shouting after seeing the lively conversation between Lu Buletin and Ho Cheng. What's the matter with you? Lu Buletin glanced at the other party. This man was Dong Zhou's confidant General Hu Zhen, and he was somewhat disdainful of Lu Buletin. This time, he was ordered by Dong Zhou to fight Sun Jian together. As Dong Zhou's confidant, Hu Zhen naturally he was the chief general. After all, Lu Buletin had not achieved an inch of merit. He was promoted to Zhonglang General and also named Duding Ho, which was an exceptional promotion. This time, he assumed the position of cavalry commander and accompanied the army. He belonged to Hu Zhen's deputy general, but Hu Zhen's posture, other Lu Buletin doesn't understand things, but Lu Buletin still knows some things in the army. How can he give the other side a good face and respond directly? Although the military order is like a mountain, the difference between the two is only half a rank now, and Lu Buletin also has his own direct line in the army. You read www.yuyuganshu.com. Hu Zhen has to speak well, Lu Buletin may let him a little bit, so he ran up to support the fire. Then I'm sorry, it was very polite not to do it directly. You are presumptuous. Hu Zhen pointed at Lu Buletin angrily and said, I am the protector of the great, Lu Buletin, you. The last person who pointed at me like this has become a dead bone in the tomb. Most protectors thought, did Buletin dare to kill Buzz? Lu Buletin raised his head, his icy eyes fell on Hu Zhen, and beside him, Ho Cheng silently raised his spear. Wei Su and Song Xian also picked up their bows and looked at Hu Zhen with bad intentions. Although there were not many soldiers from Bingzhou, they quickly came to Lu Buletin's side, and a pair of wolf-like eyes fell on Hu Zhen. You guys! Hu Zhen looked at this scene, especially Lu Buletin's eyes, a little flustered, but if he backed down at this time, how could he still be majestic as a general? But if he didn't retreat, Hu Zhen was really worried that Lu Buletin would act directly. Looking at the Ziliang army around, although there are many people, but seeing the swords drawn here, except for some of Hu Zhen's personal guards, the others silently retreated. De Duhu, Lu Kiju, what are you doing? One of the generals rushed over, looking at the scene in front of them, and quickly cupped their hands to the two of them. Then Sun Jian hasn't seen it yet, so how can he justify his actions? Humph! Without waiting for Lu Buletin to speak, Hu Zhen snorted coldly, turned his horse's head and walked away. Huaxian came to this step just in time, and if he went on like this, he was worried that he would not be able to hold on. Ha 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 ha! Looking at the back of Hu Zhen's escape, Lu Buletin's annoyance was swept away, and he burst into laughter, and the surrounding Ho Cheng and Bingzhou soldiers also laughed. Huaxiang watched this scene, sighed, and said nothing, clasped his fists at Lu Buletin, then turned his horse's head and left, and the team continued to Yuk Pass. Zhao Sen, as the general of Yuk Pass, has average abilities, but he is a good man. When Lu Buletin and the others arrived at Yuk Pass, they exchanged a few words with Hu Zhen, but they did not leave Lu Buletin behind. As a popular person beside Dong Zhou, Zhao Sen did not go to court, and did not want to have a deadlock relationship with Lu Buletin. Then Sun Jian suffered a disastrous defeat under Su Rong last year, but he still dares to come now, so he ordered Qi troops and horses immediately, and tonight I will let him know how powerful my Ziliang iron cavalry is. After Hu Zhen asked about the general direction of Yang Grenju, he immediately decided to launch troops at night to surprise Sun Jian's camp. After all, Sun Jian lost to Su Rong last year, and he lost very badly. In Hu Zhen's opinion, Sun Jian's level was average. Haha, Liu Buletin didn't say anything, he just listened. After he finished speaking, Liu Buletin suddenly sneered a few times. This laughter was so abrupt that everyone in the hall could hear it. Does the governor Liu think what someone said is inappropriate? Hu Zhen frowned and looked at Liu Buletin. There's nothing wrong, Buletin is just curious. With his ability as a general, how did he get the status he is today? If he can't fight, he depends on Huaxiang, right? Liu Buletin looked at Hu Zhen with a puzzled face, who was also a famous hero in Liangzhou, but this ability really makes people laugh. Crazy man, don't speak mad. Huaxiang's expression changed when he heard the words, and he pointed at Liu Buletin and shouted. Oh! Liu Buletin got up and squinted at Huaxiang. Buletin also wanted to meet the number 1 general in Western Liang for a while. His voice became colder, and the temperature in the entire lobby seemed to have dropped a bit. Huaxiang's pupil shrank. Zhao Sen rubbed his hands, and smiled awkwardly. De Duhu, Liu Qichu, and General Hua, please be safe. There must be a reason for seeing what Liu Qi said, and I am here to discuss, but I am here to get rid of thieves. I don't know why Liu Qi is laughing. Liu Buletin looked at Huaxiang, knelt down again, and sneered, although I have little knowledge, I also know that I know myself and the enemy. Now you don't even know where Yang Grenju is, how many soldiers and horses Sun Jian has, so he dares to send troops to attack at night. If you fought like this in the past, then it is truly a wonder that De Duhe can live to this day. De Duhe wants to die, but Buletin will not stop you, but don't bring Buletin, I am with the state soldiers. You can die on the battlefield, but you will never die. These words made the faces of the other 3 in the hall not very good looking. Zhao Sen, Hu Zhen, and Huaxiang were all from Liangzhou. Although Liu Buletin's words had no other meaning, it made the 3 of them feel a little bit. It's uncomfortable, it feels like you are saying that you Liangzhou people will die at will, and we are not the people of the state. If I were you, I would inquire about the layout of Sun Jian's camp at night, the surrounding terrain, and the number of troops of the opponent. If Su Rong can beat him, it doesn't mean that you have this ability. If you want to win the battle, I advise you not to be so arrogant. Excuse me, General Zhao, do you have a place to rest? LV Buletin got up, no longer looked at Hu Zhen, but looked at Zhao Sen. Yes, Zhao Sen nodded hurriedly, got up and sent Liu Buletin out first. Although Hu Zhen is the boss of this line, he is now being suppressed by Liu Buletin in his aura. Don't worry about whether Liu Buletin is right or not. Seeing that Hu Zhen couldn't hold back a fart for a long time, he knew that this guy was a real bastard. If he wanted to win this battle, he had to look at Liu Buletin in the end. He immediately got up and sent Liu Buletin to the door, and ordered his own guards to take Liu Buletin. After arranging residence with those generals under his command, he came back. Too much deceiving. After Liu Buletin left, Hu Zhen's pent-up anger finally erupted. Most of them protect their anger, but for now, it's better to defeat the enemy. Huaxiang said helplessly. Liu Buletin's character is not just like this to Hu Zhen. Everyone else knows to avoid his edge, but why Hu Zhen just doesn't understand this truth? Yet, why get angry? Zhao Sen came back, and he was familiar with Hu Zhen, so he was not so polite. He knelt down and sat down and said, "This battle is won, don't care who fought, the credit is not yours, what are you arguing with him? I just can't get used to his domineering behavior. How can he be qualified to be side by side with these people like me and wait for him?" Hu Zhen snorted angrily. "You don't want him to listen to what you said?" Zhao Sen said helplessly. He could see that Liu Buletin was a master who dared to pierce the sky, and he really angered him. Man can heal him. Hey, Huaxiang! Hu Zhen nodded and turned to look at Huaxiang. The end is here. Huaxiang said. You immediately send someone to inquire about Sun Jian's camp overnight to see how many troops he has and what the surrounding terrain is like. If he is not prepared, we will order the troops tonight and lead the troops to steal the camp." Hu Zhen said solemnly. "Here." Huaxiang agreed and turned around to arrange staff. Zhao Sen looked at Hu Zhen and said, "Why rush for a while, I'll check it out tomorrow. I can't swallow this breath." Hu Zhen snorted coldly, "How can you make that Lu Buletin underestimate me as a soldier in the Western Liang dynasty? People just underestimate you." Zhao Sen sneered in his heart, but Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com said with worry, "But the night battle is too dangerous. If it can't be done or the other party is already prepared, I'm afraid. Then Sun Jian is known as the Tiger of Jiangdong, but he has only a false reputation. Su Rong can beat him and flee, how can I be afraid of him?" Hu Zhen sneered, "Jiangdong is a land of barbarians, so what kind of heroes can there be?" Then, Zhao Sen didn't know how to persuade him. Why did Hu Zhen feel weak? Is Su Rong weak? It feels a lot stronger than Hu Zhen, right? But all kinds of words can only be turned into one sentence. I wish you all the best in protecting your horses. Borrowing your auspicious words. Hu Zhen nodded happily, turned around and left, ready to wait for the news. Only when Huaxiang found out the truth, he would act. On the other hand, Lu Buletin slept peacefully in the room that Zhao Sen arranged for him. As for what Hu Zhen was going to do, it was none of his business. It was best if he could be persuaded. If he couldn't, he should suffer. Ho Cheng's words during the day made Lu Buletin want to take a closer look at the lingering voice in his ears. Maybe it was a blessing from a ghost or god, but not long after he lay down, he saw Wei Su barging in excitedly. "Brother-in-law, that Huaxiang has gone to visit the camp. I heard that Hu Zhen is planning to attack at night." Wei Su excitedly asked, "Are we going to follow suit?" "What happened?" Lu Buletin said disdainfully, "Just relying on that Hu Zhen, if it wasn't for Huaxiang, he would have been able to win the battle? Such a hasty arrangement, it would be strange if he could win. Then Wei Su hesitated. "Let the soldiers go to sleep, it's not my order, no matter who calls me," I said. Lu Buletin lay down on the couch and said nonchalantly. Compared to Hu Zhen's safety, he wanted to see things like ghosts and gods. "What's the use, is it your own order? I'll go and give instructions." Seeing Lu Buletin like this, Wei Su agreed immediately, turned around and exited the room. Do you believe? A person's life is doomed from the moment your character is formed. Although there will be many opportunities and choices in life, when you face these opportunities and choices, your character and cognition are already doomed. Choose, as a doomed loser, are you willing to reshape your life from now on? Life Simulator, change the future, change your life, you deserve it. When this kind of sound appeared in his mind in the past, Lu Buletin was very irritable and wanted to expel this thing. It was strange to say that as soon as he thought of this, the sound disappeared, and it would not appear until the next day. As for when it will appear. But there is no set number, it may be very early, or it may be very late, anyway, it will appear once or twice a day. Today, after hearing what Ho Cheng said, Lu Buletin became curious about the voice that appeared in his head inexplicably. He did not directly reject it as before, but tentatively asked, "What is life? How to change it?" The two words just appeared in his mind out of thin air, and Lu Buletin didn't know how to describe the feeling. He obviously didn't see it, but it appeared in his mind. "Yes." Lu Buletin said tentatively. The next moment, the word yes seemed to light up, and then the two big words disappeared, followed by a huge message pouring into my mind. The Sims, a light brain game from the four-dimensional world, realizes the virtual reality conversion technology, which can make people experience a different life in a limited life, but it was forced to close due to many personality splits or mental breakdown events, and it will be permanently closed. Flowing into the three-dimensional space is of epoch-making significance for the life in the three-dimensional space. If it can overcome this light brain game, the three-dimensional civilization will have the opportunity to enter the four-dimensional civilization. The information is not too much, it is probably to introduce the origin of this thing, but to be honest, Lu Buletin does not understand very well many words such as light brain, virtual reality conversion, three-dimensional, four-dimensional, split personality, mental breakdown are difficult to understand, but obviously this information is difficult to understand. No need to understand either. Congratulations to the player for successfully connecting to the Sims light brain. Do you want to start a Sims life immediately? The voice sounded in his mind again, and Lu Buletin was stunned for a long time before he realized it. This player should be talking about himself, but what is a Sims? Lu Buletin didn't quite understand it, but based on the experience he had vaguely groped before, he had a certain idea. Because the player currently has no life achievement points and cannot choose his/her origin, Guang Neo will randomly select an identity for the player. I wish you a happy journey. As the voice fell, Lu Buletin felt drowsy for a while. When he regained consciousness, he found that he was in a strange state, as if he had lost his body and seemed to be integrated into the surrounding world. A village appeared in his perception, and at the same time there was another message in his mind. Luozhuang is located in a small village on the northern border of the Dogon dynasty. Everyone here takes Lu as the surname, and their ancestors were the founding generals of the Dogon dynasty. But today, hundreds of years have passed, and the glory of the past has long since faded. The villagers here make a living by farming and hunting. Because they are located in the north, they occasionally trade with Hudi in the north. Of course, this is as long as there is no war between the two sides. On an ordinary day, an ordinary life was born. Because of the lack of cloth in the village, he was named Lu Buletin by his father. I hope there will be a lot of cloth in the family in the future. Lu Buletin was horrified to find that after regaining consciousness, he could no longer see. He tried to open his eyes, but what he saw was chaos. I'm blind. For a marksman, this is absolutely unbearable, shouting angrily, but what makes him even more frightened is that he actually made the sound of a baby. This is to reincarnate yourself? And reincarnated as a blind man? Lu Buletin was furious in his heart. What a bastard, he was clearly an evil spirit, his life had just improved, and when he was about to become famous in the world, he was directly reincarnated, and he was born blind. He wanted to scold people, but couldn't, so he could only cry a lot. After a while, he couldn't cry anymore. He was just born after crying for a long time and had no strength, but the next moment, something was stuffed into his mouth, soft and hard. Lu Buletin quickly understood what it was, and wanted to spit it out in shame, but then he calmed down and sucked greedily. It was obviously not sweet, but it seemed to have a fatal temptation for him. Although he was blind, the ants still survived, and Lu Buletin was reincarnated once for no apparent reason. Although this life was difficult, he did not want to die again. Live again, I will be able to live better. With this knowledge, Lu Buletin calmed down and enjoyed his mothers with peace of mind. Although he was blind, he really enjoyed the feeling of being in his mother's arms. In his memory, he also liked it before his death. Hold myself, unfortunately. In the blink of an eye, 3 years have passed, and Lu Zhuang has a strange child. He is only 3 years old, but he seems to know a lot of knowledge. The most learned show in Zhuangli was speechless when he asked about it. You reading www.youcanshu.com doesn't like to play around like other kids, wandering around all day, asking about things outside. God is pitiful, but now Lu Zhuang communicates most with the Hu people. In the past 2 years, the military has been slack. Sometimes people come to collect taxes, but they are not welcome. The only one who has some knowledge is Lu Zioki. Because Lu Buletin was speechless when he asked him several times, now he saw Lu Buletin as if he didn't know him. What kind of person is Lu Buletin? Someone who can be arrogant if he doesn't care. Now facing a defeated general, how can he give his face to him? I have nothing to do all day, and I don't have enough strength to work in the fields now. The Lu Buletin in this life is not as talented as in the previous life. He can only hang around in the village every day and go home when he is hungry. Now he focuses on his own mind. On some things. Player, Lu Buletin current sim world, a farmer's life status, 0 reputation, 1 companion, 0 descendants, 0 age, 3 his reputation changed after he quarreled with Lu Zioki not long ago. Since then, he has been called a prodigy by some people. The age changes every year. Lu Buletin thinks that this thing may be a number. 1 represents 1, 2 represents 2, and 3. On behalf of the third, as to whether the guess is correct, it can be observed slowly later. In the years when he couldn't do anything, Lu Buletin was bored and could only study these things to pass the time, but unfortunately, this thing changed too slowly. Now more often, Lu Buletin is paying attention to this thing in his mind in a daze. As for practicing martial arts, Lu Jiazhuang is not a wealthy Zhuangzi. It is not bad to be able to eat enough. It is an extravagant hope. If you have more strength, just go and catch some game, and then you will be able to work up your strength. Although life was a bit more difficult, in this life, having both parents, nothing was more important to Lu Buletin. He lost his father shortly after he was born, and his mother died when he was 13 years old. Losing both parents too early also made Lu Buletin feel the affection for such parents in his bones. I especially longed that in this life, being able to have both parents, even if the life was difficult, would make Lu Buletin very happy. A group of children of the same age in the village slightly rejected him, because their parents used to compare Lu Buletin. After a long time, the dissatisfaction that could not be expressed to their parents naturally fell on Lu Buletin. But would Lu Buletin care about the exclusion and isolation of a group of little brats? This is obviously impossible, and Lu Buletin is a little amused by the childish behavior of these little radishes. In this life, the father rarely speaks. He sleeps every day except for work. Only when he eats will the family get together rarely. Lu Buletin doesn't even feel his father's existence. The inexplicable excess of meat in his bowl caused an inexplicable sourness in Lu Buletin's heart. Obviously, this is not a strange thing. In his previous life, eating meat was not lacking even when he was a child, but it was such an inconspicuous piece of meat. But it made Lu Buletin want to cry. Another year passed like this. When he was 4 years old, his mother was pregnant again. Lu Buletin, who had never had any siblings, felt very strange. What would it be like to have a brother or a sister who were linked by blood? She conceived in October, and when she gave birth, Lu Buletin was 5 years old. Amidst her mother's pained groans, the Lu family had a new life, a daughter. Lu Buletin felt fine. Looking at his sister's wrinkled appearance reminded him of it. In my last life, my daughter, Lu Linky, did not know how their mother and daughter were doing after she left. It had been 5 years. In a man's home, orphans, widows and mothers may not have a good life. You sell it. Little Lu Buletin, who was so excited because he had a younger sister at home, couldn't sleep that night. When he wanted to see his younger sister, he heard the conversation between his father and his mother, and he felt like he was struck by lightning. The general froze in place. Yaoer is naturally his sister. Master, there is no other way, after all, this is your flesh and blood. The mother's voice was choked and reluctant. There's no way. It's hard to support Abu in our family. Besides, this girl is always raised by others, so it's not worth it. The father shook his head, ruthlessly not looking at the infant daughter. This was the first time that Lu Buletin felt the helplessness of a poor family, but he wanted him to see his own sister being sent away like this. Lu Buletin couldn't do it. Stopping in front of my father, Dad, I can't give it away, I can eat less. No, if you eat less and starve, our house will end. The father looked at his son and categorically refused. Then I'll go to work, and I'll be able to work too. Lu Buletin stopped his father stubbornly, but in this life he was not the famous flying general Lu Buletin in his previous life. Auntie! You can't do it. Yes. Lu Buletin stared at his father stubbornly, his eyes gradually turning crimson. Father, the child will definitely be able to do it, don't take Yaome away. Looking down at his son's gaze, Father Lu felt that he was not facing a child. Those eyes were like a beast that wanted to choose someone and devour him. Just looking at it made people feel intimidated. In the end, Father Lu sat down in a daze, and Lu Buletin took the opportunity to take the swaddle out of his father's arms and comforted his sister who was woken up crying. Since that day, Lu Buletin has done what he said and went out with his father to do farm work every day. Father Lu originally wanted his son to retreat in spite of difficulties and realize the reality, but Lu Buletin had no intention of retreating in spite of difficulties. I don't know farming work, but I carry manure, fertilize, and weed every day for a whole year. I haven't called half a day. I was in a hurry at first, but by the second year, I can really share a lot of pressure on my father. www.mtlnovel.com. The family has 2 mu of thin fields. In addition, they have to be a tenant farmer for Lichhan, and they can get some. After paying taxes on the 2 mu of thin farmland, they really can't support 4 people, so they can be a tenant farmer for Lichhan. They can receive 2 more rations, but these 2 rations, plus some chickens raised by the mother at home, can indeed barely keep their family of 4 alive. When Lu Buletin was 8 years old, Lu's father had completely handed over the 2 acres of thin fields in the family to Lu Buletin to take care of it. He devoted himself to helping Lichhan as a tenant farmer, and he could get more. Many people in the village envied Lu's father for having a sensible and capable man. Son. In the past 2 years, Lu Buletin has learned a lot of things through farming. For example, he can roughly predict the weather. For example, he can use the soil to determine the best amount of fertilizer to apply. The 2 acres of thin fields at home are abruptly planted by him. But even so, the food grown in the 2 acres of thin fields and the food grown by his father as a tenant farmer gradually began to make ends meet as Lv Buletin and Yaome grew up. Lu Buletin has deeply realized how difficult it is to be an ordinary farmer in his life. Every day in order to survive, their family has already given all their energy, and they want to go further. It's hard. Father, isn't the family paying taxes there? Winter is the most leisurely day of the year. 9-year-old Lu Buletin would go hunting in the mountains every day to subsidize his family. Eyesight and experience, in addition to the range, Lu Buletin's talent in archery was preserved. The father and son were sitting at the door. Lu Buletin frowned and asked. They can have food and clothing without worry, and their family is tired like a dog every day, so they can barely fill their stomachs. Lichhan's family has fertile farmland, but the taxes paid are the same as ours. Father Lu sat on the threshold and sighed. These words made Lu Buletin stunned for a long time. Lu Buletin didn't want to live like this for the rest of his life. Even if he could grow the land better, but with only 2 acres of thin land, no matter how good he was, the yield would be limited. In the future, he would not be much better than his father. Is definitely not what Lu Buletin wanted. Even if he couldn't be as beautiful as in his previous life, Lu Buletin would have to live his own life. But how? All Lu Buletin could think of, apart from farming, was only hunting. He used the hunted prey to supplement his family. He would have a meaty smell every now and then. Occasionally, he would ask his father to take the fur to the market to sell. When he was 12 years old, thanks to Lu Buletin's efforts, the life of Lu Buletin's family finally improved a little. The mother, who had been sallow and thin all the time, now has blood on her face, and her younger sister is no longer the skinny she used to be. 12-year-old Lu Buletin, although not as tall and handsome as in his previous life, but hunting all year round makes people look very tough, especially the pair of falcon-like eyes, which makes people daunting, and many people in the village have come to the door. Speaking of kisses, many people want to marry their daughters, but Lu Buletin is not interested in these rural women. Although he is also a rural villager in this life, he does not want to be a rural villager all the time. Abu, in the future, this hunting income will also be taxed. When Lu Buletin came back that day, he saw Lichhan Lu Hong sitting at home with his father by his side. When he saw Lu Buletin coming in, he said with a smile, "Hey!" When Lu Buletin heard this, his eyes turned cold. Why? He was used to being tyrannical in his previous life. Although he was from humble beginnings in this life, the ruthlessness in his bones has not dissipated. It was just that over the past 10 years after his rebirth, Lu Buletin learned to forbear and hide the fierceness and arrogance in his bones. It doesn't mean that he is willing to be bullied. Want to bully him? Depends if there is such a thing. You child, what do you want to do? This is an order from the imperial court. Lu Hong was frightened by the fierce light in Lu Buletin's eyes. There will be no human life under the hand, right? No, what's wrong with the court? The court doesn't let people live. Lu Buletin snorted coldly. Who knows if Lu Hong felt unhappy seeing their family's life getting better, and arranged such a reason to come here to fight the autumn wind. Don't be rude. Seeing that Li Zheng was speechless by Lu Buletin, Father Lu quickly got up and scolded, then looked at Lu Hong and said, "Li Zheng, I have no way to teach my son, A Buletin is young and doesn't understand many things. Don't bother with him. Do you care?" Lu Hong looked at Lu Buletin and said with a sneer, "Don't think that being able to do two-handed archery is amazing. Believe it or not, I can teach your family to stay in this Luzwang with a single word." Hey! Lu Buletin reached out and touched the hatchet at his waist, and looked at Lu Hong with fierce eyes. His family was his weakness and his bottom line. Although he had a good life in his past life, not having family has always been a pain in Lu Buletin's heart. Now this Lu Hong is openly threatening him with his family, which Lu Buletin cannot accept no matter what. What do you want to do? Lu Hong was frightened by Lu Buletin's eyes. Doesn't this guy know what fear is? Those eyes, it is clear that they really want to kill. Nizai, don't stop! Father Lu shouted quickly upon seeing this. I'll tell you too. After all, Lu Buletin didn't pull out the hatchet, he just looked at Li Zheng and said in his ear, "My family won't pay taxes in the future, you can fill the vacancies, but if my family can't stay here any longer, before I leave I will slaughter your whole family first. If you don't believe me, try it." Although Lu Buletin in this life was not tall and mighty, he was only 6 feet at the age of 12, but there was a ruthless energy all over his body, and Lu Hong was so frightened that his face was pale, and he didn't dare to speak for a while. Humph! After Father Lu's tens of thousands of apologies, Lu Hong walked out of the house, snorted coldly, and left without looking back. "You rebellious son, this is a disaster." Father Lu pointed at Lu Buletin and cursed. "It's a disaster, if it wasn't for the fact that my father has always been so weak, how dare Lu Hong bully our family like this?" Lu Buletin didn't want to be outdone, and went back to it. Although Father Lu's habit of submissiveness is for the sake of peace of mind, there is something wrong with it. The weaker you are at that time, the less restrained others will be, and the more you will be more aggressive. Since ancient times, people have not fought against officials. You will bring disaster to our family like this. Father Lu sighed. He was used to being weak. Even if he was facing his son, once Lu Buletin became tough, he instinctively chose to be soft. "Go down. What kind of official is a small Lichhan?" Lu Buletin said disdainfully. Although Lichhan was the biggest official they could meet for the people of Luzwang, the county system between the village and the imperial court was actually it's not the same thing. The most powerful people in this Li are always in charge of the local powerful people. Most of the fields of the whole village are in the hands of Lichun. The people in the village are all tenant farmers in Lichun. At least from LV Buletin's point of view, it would not be difficult for him to kill there. Father Lu was told quite a bit by Lu Buletin's words, and he sighed, "Forget it, I can't stay here any longer. I'll pack up and prepare to leave here and make a living." Lu Buletin couldn't understand why he was so afraid of a small person. Until that night, his home was on fire, and his mother and sister were burned to death in the fire. Lu Buletin helped his father to escape in a panic, but the home was burned down. Lu Buletin didn't know. No need to know who did it. In the darkness, someone hurried back. Lu Buletin picked up the bow and arrow and shot it with one arrow. The strong hatred and anger raged on Lu Buletin's nerves. He hung the hatchet around his waist and chased after the arsonists. Walking forward slowly, those people obviously did not expect Lu Buletin to be so tough. They just came to kill him when he was in trouble. Seeing the villagers being shot and killed by Lu Buletin, the other party showed no mercy. Most of these villagers are the kind of people who are relatively ruthless on weekdays. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com, but no matter how ruthless they are, they will only take advantage of the villagers. They did not expect to set fire to death today, but what they did not expect is that Lu Buletin kills people with such ferocity. How can he look like a 12-year-old child? "Abu, I was wrong, don't kill me," Lichun asked me to set the fire. "I don't know anything else, you let me go." A villager knelt down in front of Lu Buletin, and the villagers, Lu Buletin naturally recognized, but how could Lu Buletin let him go at this moment? He pulled out the hatchet and wiped it across the opponent's neck. The blood stained the tears on Lu Buletin's face. He hadn't cried for a long time. After killing the last person, Lu Buletin did not go back, but found 2 barrels of arrows, then picked up torches and set fire to the village. Everyone was accomplices, and he wanted to destroy everything. They found a high place and blocked it in front of Lu Hong's house in Lichun. When they came out, they shot and killed the other. There were flames all around. Only the main gate was left for them to go out, but Lu Buletin stayed there. Lu Hong never dreamed that this kid would be so ruthless. He directly set Zhuangzi on fire. Seeing that the fire was getting more and more fierce, the feeling of regret was growing in his heart. A cluster of arrows from the sky shot through his thigh. Under the severe pain, Lu Hong fell to his knees on the ground. When he looked up, he saw Lu Buletin's wolf-like eyes that seemed to eat people. The fire got bigger. Lu Hong listened to the desperate cries of the clan, and frantically kowtowed to Lu Buletin. "Abu, it was my fault, I am willing to pay my life with my death, please, please spare my family, your aunt. She also hugged you, have you forgotten?" Lu Buletin just stared at all this indifferently. His wailing was mixed with cursing. Li Zheng's frantic begging didn't get Lu Buletin the slightest pity, there was only a strong disgust and hatred. Until all the voices disappeared, Li Zheng was also swallowed by the firelight. Lu Buletin just took back the bow, but the monstrous hatred in his chest did not dissipate. At dawn, the fire in Luzhuang became more and more intense, but the fire in Lu Buletin's house had already burned out. Naturally, the entire village was not killed, but after this incident, Luzhuang was gone. When Lu Buletin came back with the hatchet, Lu's father was kneeling in the ruins, holding 2 charred corpses in his arms. Lu Buletin stared at this scene in a daze, his chest was blocked, and he looked at his father's empty eyes. He opened his mouth, "Dad! Don't dare!" Father Lu shook his head, "Xiaomin dare not climb high, I don't know where you are so fierce, but waiting for a small family, to survive in this world, I have to suffer some anger and some suffering. It can only be swallowed in the stomach, you are so temperamental, I can't stand it when I wait for a small family. Are you wrong?" Lu Buletin felt that he was right, and it was clearly the right wrong there, so why should he swallow his anger? "But, Looking at the charred corpses of his mother and sister, Lu Buletin didn't know how to refute. The escaped villagers reported to the officials, and people from their own officials came to arrest them. Lu Buletin raised his father and said, "Father, I'll go first. Let's go." Father Lu shook his head, hugged the charred corpse and said, "I've lived here for half my life, and I don't know where I should go. You are still young, and you will have great potential in the future, so just run for your own life, but at the moment of parting, I advise you to accept your temperament. I have never read a book for my father, but I also know some truths. In this life, it is impossible for everything to go smoothly. If you only know how to deal with things in this way, no matter your body, no matter where you are, how talented you are, I'm afraid there will be no good results in the end. Father, if you have anything to say, I'll leave first." Lu Buletin said to his father, although he didn't know when the government would come to arrest him, he wouldn't be too slow. Father Lu didn't say anything, just hugged the two charred corpses and said, "Your mother has been with my father all my life, and she has never enjoyed any blessings. Now that she is dead, my father wants to accompany her on the last journey, so it is safe to ask her to go to the ground, Yeomei. It was you who left it back then, and now it is because of you that she died, a father and a daughter, and a father can't let her corpse be exposed in the wilderness." Lu Buletin opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. After a long time, he suddenly threw the hatchet in his hand. He was someone who died once, so what were you afraid of? At the moment, he no longer wanted to escape. He followed his father and dug 2 pits for his mother and younger sister silently. At this time, there was no way to buy a thin coffin, so he had to bury it hastily. In the afternoon, people from the government finally came. They looked at Lu Chuang, who had been burned down, and listened to people telling what happened last night. They were shocked and speechless. An older man stared at Lu Buletin and said, "So, your house is burning down there. Not only did you kill those who set it on fire, but you also killed Lu Hong's family, and burned the entire Lu Chuang." "That's right." Lu Buletin was not as prudent as his father was when facing these officials. He nodded coldly. He was accepting his fate. This life has not been good. The reason is that Lu Hong wants to raise your taxes. The older Yacha looked at Lu Buletin and asked again. "Exactly." Lu Buletin nodded again. "Boy, you are young and energetic, and you have good skills. It's a pity." The older Yacha sighed. He killed nearly 100 people this night. How could it be a death sentence? Lu Buletin's immature face can't help but sigh. With such skills, if he goes to the frontier to defend the frontier, he will be a good hand. Maybe he can be a general and honor his ancestors. A sentence, do you have any regrets? Lu Buletin glanced at him when he heard the words, "Why should I regret it? What's wrong with me? The truth is right, but things in this world can make sense without reason. He doesn't make sense in many things. This incident killed your mother and your sister, don't say no, if there is no previous they won't die, take a step back and say, even if they don't die, how will you live in Luzwang in the future? If you leave your hometown, how will you live? Remember in your next life that you have to take the overall situation into consideration and consider everything carefully, just for the sake of to pray. Do you think it's worth it to take your whole family on board?" The older Yacha looked at Lu Buletin and asked. "But that tone?" Lu Buletin said dissatisfiedly. The thing he couldn't bear the most was his anger. Angry? People live in this world, who is not angry? Yachai shook his head, thinking it was a bit ridiculous, but you are still young, so you probably don't understand these principles. Just care about your own feelings. One day when you can swallow your voice for the sake of your family, you may have great achievements in this life, but unfortunately, you probably won't live that day. The old Yachai also cherishes talents, so he said a little more. In his opinion, it is common for Lu Buletin to be brave and ruthless at his age. It is not necessarily a good thing for him to have powers that are not suitable for his age. Hearing Lu Buletin's ears made him a little dry. After all, he has memories from his previous life. He was almost 40 years old from the 2 lifetimes combined. It's a good thing that people have power, but people can't be controlled by power. The old Yacha walked away shaking his head. Although this case is big, it is not difficult to solve. Because nearly 100 people were killed in one night, the influence was too great in this peaceful age. The approval letter of Lu Buletin and his son came down quickly, and they were executed. The father and son were beheaded and displayed to the public. Lu Buletin also ended his short 1-2-year life. However, his consciousness did not dissipate when the head fell, just as he came to this world 12 years ago. Today, 12 years later, after leaving the body, Lu Buletin's consciousness slowly began to rise, and the surrounding scenery once again appeared in him. It appeared in his consciousness, first the execution ground, and gradually as his consciousness rose, the entire county appeared in his consciousness. Looking at the appearance of his own and his father's heads falling to the ground, it was really ugly. Lu Buletin suddenly realized a problem. He wanted to find out whether his father's soul floated up like himself, but he couldn't find anything until he woke up again. Suddenly opening his eyes, the scene in front of him was both unfamiliar and familiar. In the dimly lit room, Lu Buletin sat up slowly, staring at the oil lamp in front of him in a daze, until the voice in his mind sounded again. Congratulations to the player for completing an exploration of the simulated world. The evaluation of this life simulation is C. Your life is short and regrettable. Do you want to check the detailed evaluation and gain? The voice echoed in his mind, and Lu Buletin was a little dazed. He died first, and then reincarnated into another family, but after being killed, he returned to the body he thought was dead. The life simulator did not take him away. Life? Another life experience is still vivid in my mind, but now it seems that it is a big dream, and this dream is very long. For this thing called life simulator, Lu Buletin has now figured out how to use it, and with the thought, new information will appear in front of him. Experiencing the world, a farmer's life current status, finished status, 1. You slaughtered the village by yourself, and you have a high status in the eyes of many criminals. Unfortunately, you were beheaded. If you are willing to continue to live, you may achieve something on the path of 0, reputation, 15, as a teenage prodigy, although the final outcome is embarrassing, you are unwilling to be oppressed, and the feat of rising up against the local underworld forces you to be sought after by many people living in oppression after your death. Descendants, 0, if you are not filial, you are not a qualified man. Age, 12, there are too many geniuses who die young because of their personality, but because of their recklessness, you have missed too many scenes of life. The first time you enter The Sims, you can get a low C rating because your survival time is too short, otherwise your rating should be very good. In addition to the 28 life simulation points you get Indiana the World, you also get one opportunity to choose. You can choose one of the following 3 skills as your reward for this life simulation. Please make your choice as soon as possible. 1. Rough carpenter skills. 2. Rough tailoring function. 3. A little strengthening of the heart function of one of the 5 internal organs. Carpenter, tailor. Looking at the choices given, although Lu Buletin had doubts about the last one, he never thought about becoming a carpenter or tailor, so he decided to strengthen his heart. The moment he made his choice, Lu Buletin felt his heart beat violently a few times, and then a heat flow seemed to spread from his chest and flowed to his limbs and veins. At the same time, he felt that his breathing was much easier than before. The child has a sense of refreshment. I didn't pay too much attention to the changes in my body. If I said what the benefits of Sims brought to Lu Buletin this time, it was definitely not heart strengthening or life simulation points that I didn't know what to use, but the growth of the mind. Lu Buletin naturally knew the truth, but it was the first time he had such a profound experience, but until now, he still didn't understand what if he didn't do that? Are you being bullied there? LV Bulletin couldn't accept it, but his family was killed because of himself. This is definitely not what Lu Bulletin wanted. If he could do it all over again. The world that the player has experienced is automatically recorded, and the host can start over with the original identity. Should he enter the simulated world again, the farmer's life? The prompt from the simulator made Lu Bulletin feel a bit joyful. It would be wonderful if this life could be repeated, but he did not choose to go back immediately. First, he didn't know how to deal with it, and secondly, for the world, it may just be a dream, but for Lu Bulletin, he has been away from here for 12 years, he is homesick, his own home, a nagging wife, and a daughter who is just 8 years old. For Lu Bulletin, he has been away from his wife and children for 12 years, and now he just wants to finish the battle as soon as possible and go back. There were a lot of footsteps in the distance. This was the sound of the army marching. It should be that Hu Zhen's incompetent person was about to take action. Lu Bulletin thought about it, and he was already sleepless at the moment. See the ability of the Jiangdong tigers. All the way to the vicinity of the city wall, I saw that the city gate of Yuquiguan was already wide open, and a large number of soldiers walked out along the city gate. At this time, it was the end of the ugly time, and it would not be long before dawn, but at this moment it was also the darkest between heaven and earth. When Lu Bulletin came to the city wall, Zhao Sen was vigilantly paying attention to the movements outside the city, for fear that the enemy would attack in the chaos. Here? But you want to fight together. It's a big taboo to command the troops if they don't belong to each other. Now it's not right for our army to go into battle before the integration is complete. I still have a quarrel with that Hu Zhen. If we send troops together at this time, we will definitely lose. It belongs to Hu Zhen, but his troops and horses are all under his control. Hu Zhen can't control it. If they really go up together, they can't help a lot. Instead, they are jealous of each other, and their combat power cannot be exerted. Then I don't know what Commander Lu thinks, how will this victory be? Zhao Sen asked with a smile. That depends on how much military power Huaxiang has. Lu Bulletin held the parapet, and Hu Zhen's troops had all left the city, and the city gates began to slowly close. Zhao Sen hesitated for a moment, then bowed to Lu Bulletin and said, "Then the cavalry director Lu really didn't do anything? If we lose this battle www.mtlnovel.com General Hu will not be able to escape punishment, but I am afraid that the prestige of the cavalry commander will also be damaged." If it was before, Lu Bulletin would naturally be happy to see Hu Zhen's joke. Hu Zhen's death would be best, but now Lu Bulletin did not immediately reject it. From the overall point of view, it was naturally best to defeat Sun Jian. On his own, Lu Bulletin was homesick now, and wanted to go back to accompany his wife and children. Naturally, he was unwilling to continue to spend time here. He was naturally unhappy just to let that Hu Zhen make a contribution. "Open the city gate, I'll let people gather troops and horses, maybe it can save that Hu Zhen's life." Lu Bulletin looked at Zhao Sen, although he knew that he was helping Hu Zhen and letting himself swept the formation, but Lu Bulletin really didn't want to be there. It was a waste of time here, and the memory of 12 years ago was somewhat vague. Lu Bulletin asked Zhao Sen to open the city gate, and then asked his guards to wake up Ho Cheng and Wei Su, and ordered the troops to go out of the city with him. Then just take advantage of this time to recall the cause of the incident 12 years ago, and let people inquire about the surrounding terrain. If you decide to send troops, you can send troops while inquiring, and you don't necessarily need to inquire. What's more, there is Hu Zhen Kailu ahead. Feng Xian, why should I help that Hu Zhen? Ho Cheng and the others quickly ordered Qi people to join with Lu Bulletin, and asked rather resentfully. "I just want to finish the fight and go back early. Besides, I don't need to help him." Lu Bulletin was very indifferent. After all, the conflict with Hu Zhen happened not long ago to others, but to Lu Bulletin, it was a big deal. It was 12 years ago, and no matter how bad it was, it would have dissipated for so long. Under the command of Lu Buletin, only 1,000 soldiers and horses slowly opened out of the city gate. The city gate behind them was like the closed mouth of a giant beast, which added a bit of gloom to the night. Disappeared into the depths of the night. The night in early spring was still cold, and people gathered together, and there were not many lights in Sun Jian's camp. Hu Zhen sat on the back of the horse, trying to make himself able to see more clearly, but in the faint light emitted by the faint lights, he could only see a trace of light reflected by the armor. General. Huaxiang took his horse to Hu Zhen's side, bowed and said, "Then Sun Jian doesn't seem to be prepared." Hu Zhen nodded, thinking about it too. They came from Yuk Pass. No matter how powerful Sun Jian's scouts were, it was impossible for them to detect the movements behind Yuk Pass, right? Looking up at the sky, there was a faint light on the horizon. "If you don't make a move, I'm afraid you will lose this great opportunity." At the moment, Hu Zhen looked at Huaxiang and said, "You and I will each lead the troops and horses and kill them from the gates on both sides. Enter, remember, if you meet that Sun Jian, you don't have to be merciful, you will definitely behead his head." Before he set off on the expedition, Hu Zhen had boasted about Hai Cao, and he would definitely behead the Qing Shao officials. On the battlefield today, only Sun Jian is qualified for this. Wu Guang, especially that Lu Buletin. If he can kill Sun Jian, he must go to the Prime Minister and sue Lu Buletin for disrespecting the military order in order to cut his hatred. Here. Huaxiang agreed. The two of them led a team of men and horses to separate around the Yuanmen on both sides. Huaxiang approached the Yuanmen first, shot the soldiers stationed on the Yuanmen, and then easily opened the Yuanmen. Sun Jian defended it. The slack was beyond Huaxiang's expectations, and a bad premonition was born in his heart, and he hurriedly led people to the surrounding camps. "General, it's all empty camps." A soldier rushed over and shouted loudly. "Not good." Huaxiang's expression changed, and he subconsciously wanted to retreat, but at this moment, the sound of gongs came from behind, followed by the rockets pouring out of the sky, and the back road was obviously blocked. "Died." Huaxiang said solemnly, "All the troops don't panic, follow me to kill from the front and join with the great protector." Hu Zhen and Huaxiang chose to face each other. Since he was ambushed on his side, Huaxiang did not believe that Hu Zhen would be there. Running wildly, wanting to meet Hu Zhen. On the other side, Hu Zhen didn't have the quick reaction speed of Huaxiang. When the screams of killing sounded from the rear, his first reaction was to retreat and leave the camp. But the soldiers in the rear were suddenly attacked, and there was already a great chaos. At this moment, when they turned around, the army was already in chaos. How could they continue to fight with each other? "Ziliang thieves, capture them before they can." In the chaos of the army, one of the generals of the Sun family saw that Hu Zhen's armor was clear, and he swung his weapons to kill him first. Seeing this, Hu Zhen hurriedly waved his knife to block him. Don't look at his commander-in-chief being led away, but in terms of martial arts, he is not bad. The Qiang and Han people live together in the land of Western Liang, and they rebel all the year round. Those who grew up on that land, maybe they don't know any tactics and strategies, but most of them are brave and good at war. The general of the Sun family is Zhou Mao, one of the 4 generals under Sun Jian's command, so he is also a dragon sparrow, with good martial arts, but in the face of Hu Zhen, not getting the upper hand at all. The two of them fought on the same level, but the Ziliang army under Hu Zhen had already been killed, and fled in embarrassment. Hu Zhen saw it in his eyes, and his heart was broken. How could he still have the heart to continue the fierce battle with Zhou Mao? The second wanted to escape, but was stopped by Zhou Mao, so anxious that Hu Zhen shouted, "Huaxiang, save me!" "Haha, that general of yours, I'm afraid he's already dead at the moment, how can I save you?" Zhou Mao laughed loudly when he heard the words, and while Hu Zhen was distracted, a knife opened a huge scar on his chest, blood gurgled out. Hu Zhen screamed, turned his horse's head and wanted to force his way out, but where would Zia Mao be willing to let go? Don't panic, General, Huaxiang is here. Just as the immortal Hu Zhen was encircling him, Huaxiang, who rushed out all the way in the opposite direction, heard Hu Zhen's cry for help, and rushed to kill him. He was besieging Hu Zhen here. Han Dang was caught off guard. He saw Huaxiang crossed the sea of fire first, and descended from the sky like a of war. Zia Mao was chasing him, but he saw a darkness in front of him. When he looked up, he saw Huaxiang's slashing sword. He was cut off by Huaxiang. Durong. All around was jokingly watching the generals of the Sun family who were killing Hu Zhen by Zia Mao, but in the blink of an eye, it was Zia Mao who was slashed by the sword, and everyone was furious. Sun Jian was even more angry. With a knife, he will come to fight Huaxiang. It's just that Huaxiang didn't dare to stop after he cleared Hu Zhen's siege with a knife. He immediately took Hu Zhen and said, "Da Du Hu, the enemy army has already been ambushed, I'll wait to break through." It must be that Lu Bulletin, I was worried that I would steal the credit, and secretly tipped off. Hu Zhen said with bitter hatred and gritted teeth as he walked. I'm afraid it's not that simple. The figure of Zhao Sen flashed in Huaxiang's mind. To say that he knew the most about their plan, Zhao Sen was probably the one who knew the most. Instead, Lu Bulletin went to rest early. Is it out of the city to attack at night? In contrast, Zhao Sen has a higher chance of reading www.yuyuganshu.com. But these are already things to come later, and now it is only reasonable to think about how to escape here alive. But behind him, Sun Jian was annoyed that the two of them had killed their favorite generals, but they were chasing after him, and seeing that he was about to be caught up, Huaxiang said to Hu Zhen, "De Du Hu first, Huaxiang is the De Du Hu." Hu Zhen couldn't be more polite at this moment. Hearing this, he nodded towards Huaxiang while pretending to be moved, and then he rode his horse and whipped away even more frantically. Huaxiang slowed down his steps with the remaining hundreds of Ziliang soldiers, stopped at a narrow road, turned his horse's head and raised his sword and shouted angrily, "Ziliang Huaxiang is here, who would dare to fight me?" The voice was thick, resounding in the mountains like muffled thunder, and the Jiangdong army, who was chasing after him, slowly stopped and formed a battle. "My lord, I'll go meet him." Huang Gai came out with a knife. He had the best friendship with Zia Mao. Seeing Zia Mao killed by this man with his own eyes, he hated his teeth so much that he just wanted to kill this man with his own hands. Slow. Sun Jian grabbed Huang Gai and said with a sneer, "This is a battle between two armies, and it's not a fight. Where is the archer? Shoot me these barbarians from Ziliang." He had already lost a Zia Mao, and he didn't want Huang Gai to make a mistake. At this moment, the light of the sky was beginning to dawn, and the archers quickly gathered to draw their bows and arrows. After a short pause, they quickly released the arrow clusters in their hands. One after another, the icy arrow clusters fell towards Huaxiang, and the soldiers of Ziliang fell one after another. Huaxiang's warhorse also took an arrow, so he could only dismount and hide behind the mountain wall, but looking at the soldiers of the Western Liang dynasty who were constantly falling to the ground, Huaxiang smiled bitterly. Today, he is afraid of doomed. Jiangdong tigers, do you only bully more and less like this? Just as Huaxiang was desperate, a rather arrogant voice echoed in the valley. Huaxiang, who had thought he was going to die, suddenly had a glimmer of hope in his heart. Hu Zhen ran away, but Huaxiang was trapped in this canyon. He looked around. Although he took the initiative to stay behind, he still felt a bit sad at the moment. It was his own soldiers who were born and died. Huaxiang only felt injustice for these soldiers who died in battle, and of course, including himself who was about to die in battle. Jiangdong tigers, will they only use more to bully less? At this moment, Huaxiang's arrogant voice sounded like the sound of heaven. Sun Jian, who was about to encircle Huaxiang, hurriedly raised his head and looked around. The sky was already twilight, but as far as his eyes could see, there was no figure. Just as he was surprised, a group of people rushed out from behind them, not yet approaching. 3 sharp arrows arrived almost at the same time, and the 3 soldiers who were the first to find the clue were lifted up by the force of the arrow cluster. "Let's turn after the formation." Sun Jian's face sank. He turned his horse's head and raised the ancient ingot knife. He could see clearly that there were not many soldiers and horses, at most 1,000 people, and almost all of Hu Zhen's army were killed by them. The army has been wiped out, and although this sudden massacre has caused some confusion, but... Before he finished speaking, he saw that the general had already entered the crowd. Looking from a distance, he saw a square-shaped halberd in the opponent's hand. When waving it, the cold light flickered, and the halberd cloud was flickering, but the most eye-catching, but it was still the war horse under his crotch. It was red all over, and it was more than a bit bigger than an ordinary war horse. It didn't charge like a horse, but rather like a beast. This man and 1 horse, rushing into the crowd is like a tiger catching a sheep. In general, where Fang Tianhua halberd passed, no grass grew, and the formation that was already somewhat chaotic was killed by him, and it opened in an instant. But the other party did not have the slightest desire to fight. After tearing open a gap, he quickly rushed out without giving the surrounding soldiers a chance to be surrounded. He has already killed another place. He has an extremely terrifying insight into the battlefield, and even fleeting flaws can be infinitely magnified by him. Who is this? Sun Jian saw that the rear line had been smashed by the opponent, and there were also cavalry behind him. After he opened his mouth, he rushed up to slash and followed the opponent's footsteps. Although the number of people was small, but it was the killing of Jiangdong soldiers and fleeing, and the army was defeated. Even Sun Jian, who was known as the Jiangdong Tiger, looked at this scene with horror. This person was at the 2 extremes of Su Rong, but he was equally powerful and terrifying, even more powerful than Su Rong. Still more than that. It should be Lu Buletin. Huang Gai leaned over to Sun Jian's side, stared at the red rabbit horse that Lu Buletin was sitting on, and said solemnly, "My lord, if we let him kill like this, our generals and soldiers will probably kill the entire army." Defeated. This person is very brave. Dema and Yugong, you 2 go to stop him. I and Gongfu will stop the cavalry under his command. Sun Jian said solemnly. Most of the ordinary cavalry were mainly cavalry and archery, but this cavalry was different. They were extremely brave in close combat. Sun Jian had only heard about the bravery of the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry when he was fighting in the Western Liang dynasty. When he saw it today, he really understood how the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry was. Bravely, Lu Buletin and the cavalry seemed not to be in the same place, but they cooperated tacitly. Lu Buletin tore open the crack, causing chaos in the army. This was not really a brilliant method of warfare at first, but with the bravery of Lu Buletin and the bravery of the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry, it was unparalleled. Jiangdong soldiers were considered a strong army in the feudal alliance, but in front of the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry at this moment, Sun Jian himself doubted it. Are you bringing a bunch of rabble with you? Han Dang and Cheng Pu agreed to join forces to kill Lu Buletin, while Sun Jian and Huang Gai were about to stop the cavalry in the rear. In his opinion, although Lu Buletin was brave, it was not easy for Cheng Pu and Han Dang. If he can stand still with him for a moment, as long as he can deal with Lu Buletin for a while, he will be able to separate the Bingzhou Iron Cavalry from Lu Buletin at the rear. In this way, Lu Buletin's tactics will be cracked. There, Lu Buletin saw that someone was actually killing him, but his face showed joy. He killed the Jiangdong soldiers who were close to him with a halberd, and then his legs were lightly clamped on the horse's belly. With a hiss, the 4 hoofs suddenly accelerated, and in an instant they were already in front of Han Dang. In Han Dang's stunned eyes, he saw a flicker of cold light, and at the same time that Fang Tianhuaji passed Han Dang's neck, Lu Buletin had already passed by Han Dang on a red rabbit horse. Ptar Yu Zhu's blood spurted out of the cavity, Do Da's head rose into the sky, and in the rain of blood, Lu Buletin had already killed Cheng Piu. Yugong Cheng Piu saw his friend die in battle, his eyes were bloodshot, and when he saw Lu Buletin coming, he was angry and fighting with bulls, and he was not afraid at all. Lu Buletin naturally couldn't die with him. Fang Tianhua halberd pressed down, and the phoenix nodded, that Fang Tianhua halberd was extremely fast, but at this moment, it seemed like a heavy object was hanging. Pushing forward, this kind of process from extremely fast to extremely slow, makes people feel uncomfortable just looking at it, but Cheng Piu, who faced this move, saw that Lu Buletin was pressing forward, but there was nothing in front of him. Strangely, he saw his iron halberd and snake spear thrust out, as if he had put the snake spear under the opponent's halberd. Boom! It was hard to imagine that such a slow halberd could make a sound like a morning bell and a twilight drum. Cheng Piu only felt his arms go numb. Seeing this, Lu Buletin let out a light sigh. Although there are many fierce generals in the world, there are very few who can easily pass a hand like him. This person can block his serious weapon and still not let go, but he has some skills. See, under the joy of hunting, Lu Buletin dragged Fang Tianhua's halberd, and with a cold light, swept along the spear shaft and swept towards the opponent's neck. Cheng Piu quickly let go and avoided Lu Buletin's Fang Tianhua halberd at the same time with an iron plate bridge. So far, it was considered a disaster, and it was impossible for Lu Buletin to take Fang Tianhua halberd back in an instant. Death to the traitor! At this moment, he heard a tiger roar, but it was Sun Jian who saw his love General Han Dang being beheaded by a halberd like this. In his heartache, he was also worried about Cheng Piu's safety and asked Huang Gai to stop him. Lu Buletin's Bingzhou iron cavalry had come to fight Lu Buletin with an ancient ingot sword. There was no martial virtue on the battlefield. Seeing that Lu Buletin was using an old trick, he was about to take back Fang Tianhua's halberd. Lu Buletin turned around at an incredible angle and led Fang Tian to draw the halberd, blocking Sun Jian's sword. Sun Jian's arms trembled. The moment he passed Lu Buletin on the wrong side of the horse, Lu Buletin had already stood up, and he drew his sword with his backhand and slashed at Sun Jian. Sun Jian hurriedly waved his sword to block. Lu Buletin also turned the horse's head, tacitly understanding at the same time, jumped on the horse, and fought against Lu Buletin.